Motivation and inspiration. How leaders bring out the best in people. Welcome to chapter 7 of our detailed lecture on leadership versus management. What's the difference? In the previous chapter, we explored communication and understood why communication is often described as the foundation of leadership. We discussed listening, clarity, feedback, difficult conversations, trust, transparency, and importance of aligning words with actions. Now we move to another fundamental question. How do leaders bring out the best in people? Why do some employees give only the minimum effort required? Why do others involuntarily go beyond expectations? Why does one manager create a team that simply follow instructions while another creates a team that takes ownership? Why do people sometimes work harder for a leader even when there is no immediate financial reward? The answer takes us to the subject of motivation and inspiration. These two words are often used interchangeably, but they are not exactly the same. Motivation is connected with the forces that encourage a person to take action. Inspirations is connected with creating a sense of possibility, purpose, or emotional commitment. Management often focuses on creating conditions that support performance. Leadership often goes further by helping people believe that their work has meaning and that they are capable of achieving something greater. So, what exactly is motivation? Motivation is a force that directs, energizes, and sustains behavior towards a particular objective. And to put forward in a simple term that many of you can understand, motivation answers the question, why would someone want to do this? Now imagine an employee working late to complete an important project, and why are they doing it? Maybe perhaps they want bonus, perhaps they want a promotion, or they do not want to disappoint their manager, or even they might enjoy the work they are doing. Perhaps they believe strongly in the project, or they might feel responsible for their team, or they simply want to build their reputation. Whatever you may say, the action would be the same, but the underlying motivation can be very different. Understanding this is essential for leaders and also managers. Now, let's understand motivation is not the same for everyone. One of the biggest mistakes in people management is that we assume that everybody is motivated by the same things. Not exactly. Now, you please imagine five employees. The first wants career advancement, and the second one just wants recognition, while the third wants financial security, and the fourth might want flexibility. The fifth wants challenging work and opportunities to learn. So, if the manager uses only one motivation strategy, some employees may respond while the others might not. So, this is why effective leaders understand those individual differences. While a leader asks, what matters to this person, and what motivates this employee, what kind of work brings out their strengths, what kind of recognition do they value, what are their aspirations. This does not mean treating people unfairly. So it means understanding what helps different people perform at their best. Now let's understand extrinsic motivation. To begin with, extrinsic motivation, it comes from external rewards or consequences, and the examples include It might be salary, bonus, promotion, awards, recognition, benefits, and prizes, performance incentives, job security. These can be powerful motivators. Uh, Let me come up with some examples. Suppose a sales organization offers a bonus for achieving a particular target. Employees may work harder because the financial reward is attractive. This is a legitimate form of motivation. And you see, organizations cannot ignore compensation. People need fair and appropriate financial rewards for their work, definitely, right? But there is a limitation. External rewards alone do not necessarily create long term commitment. Now that we have understood extrinsic, let us understand intrinsic motivation. So, this kind of motivation comes from within an individual. A person may be motivated because they enjoy work, they might want to learn, might want to master a particular skill, and they might feel a sense of achievement or believe in the purpose, value and autonomy, feel that their work matters, experience personal satisfaction. Now imagine an employee learning a new programming language. Nobody is forcing them. There may be no immediate bonus, but they enjoy learning, and that is what is intrinsic motivation. Or now imagine a teacher spending extra time helping a student because the teacher genuinely wants the student to succeed. So, again, the motivation is largely internal. Money matters, but money is not everything, yes, right? This applies for most of us. It's important to avoid an extreme view. So, some people say money doesn't matter. That is unrealistic. Fair compensation definitely matters. If employees believe they are significantly underpaid, motivation can definitely suffer. Financial security can create stress. I'm sorry, financial insecurity can create quite it might be quite stressful, and unfair compensation can create resentment. So organizations must provide reasonable and fair compensation, but after basic financial needs and fairness are addressed, additional money does not necessarily create unlimited motivation. So a large salary cannot automatically compensate for a toxic manager and no growth situation. There might be no respect, no autonomy, no meaningful work at all, or constant unfairness, or quite poor working conditions. Therefore, compensation is important, but it is only one part of the motivational picture. Now, let's understand Herzberg's two factor theory. So, a famous management theory associated with motivation is Herzberg's two factor theory. Friedrich Herzberg proposed that workplace factors can be broadly understood as hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors include things such as salary, working conditions, company policies, job security, and relationships with supervisors. These factors may not necessarily create strong motivation when they are good, but their absence or poor quality can create dissatisfaction. So, let me tell what are the motivators that are included here: achievement, recognition, responsibility, growth, advancement, meaningful work. These factors are more directly connected with positive motivation and satisfaction. Now, the important lesson here is removing dissatisfaction is not always the same as creating motivation. Let me give an example of the two factor idea. Imagine an employee receives a good salary. The office is comfortable. The company has reasonable policies. The employee has job security. There are no major problems. But the employee's work is repetitive. So nobody recognizes their contribution. there is no opportunity to grow at all, and also there is no additional responsibility to take over. So the employee may not be unhappy in the traditional sense, but they may still feel unmotivated. Now imagine the organization gives the employee a challenging project, greater responsibility, recognition, learning opportunities, a chance to contribute ideas. The employee may become significantly more engaged. And what happens? This demonstrates the difference between removing dissatisfaction and creating genuine motivation. So, now let's understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All management students would definitely know this. Another famous framework in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it proposes the that human needs cannot be understood in levels commonly represented as psychological needs, physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness, and love, esteem, self actualization. The model suggests that people have different categories of needs, from basic survival and security to higher physiological fulfillment. In the work place, this can help us think about motivation. An employee worried about job security may be less focused on personal growth. An employee whose basic needs are relatively secure may increasingly value recognition, achievement, belonging, growth, and meaning. The theory should not be treated as an absolute formula for every person, but it provides a useful way of thinking about the different factors that can influence motivation. So, what is motivation through purpose? One of the strongest forms of leadership motivation comes from purpose. People often want to know, why does my work matter? Imagine an employee processing insurance claims. The work may seem administrative, but a leader can help connect it to purpose. Every accurate claim you process helps a family receive support when they need it. The task has not changed, the employee's understanding of its importance has changed. Purpose gives work meaning, and meaningful work can be highly motivating. Now, let's understand the power of a bigger purpose. Consider an organization involved in education. If employees think we sell educational courses, this is one perspective. But if the organization says we help people gain skills that can improve their careers and lives, the work gains a broader meaning. Purpose can connect individuals' tasks to a larger contribution. This is one reason leaders spend so much time communicating vision and mission. People are often more committed when they can see how their work contributes to something larger than themselves. Time to understand inspiration versus motivation. Motivation often answers what encourages me to act. Inspiration often answers what makes me believe that something meaningful is possible. A manager may motivate an employee with a bonus. A leader may inspire an employee by showing what team could achieve. For example, we are not simply launching another product, we are creating a service that could make this process significantly easier for thousands of customers. That creates a broader picture. Inspiration can create emotional energy around a goal. Inspiration does not mean constant enthusiasm. So, leadership inspiration is sometimes misunderstood as being energetic all the time. A leader does not need to deliver motivational speeches every morning. Inspiration can also come from calm confidence, integrity, persistence, courage, optimism, consistency, resilience. Imagine a team facing a serious setback. The leader does not shout, everything is amazing. Instead, the leader says, This is a difficult situation. We have made mistakes, but we have overcome difficult situations before. Here is what we need to do next. That can be deeply inspiring. Inspiration is not pretending everything is perfect, it is helping people believe that progress is possible. Leadership and self motivation. A leader cannot continuously motivate others while being completely disconnected from their own motivation. Leaders also experience fatigue, failure, disappointment, stress, uncertainty, frustration. Therefore, effective leaders need self awareness. They need to understand what drives them, what values guide them, what are they doing, why are they doing this work, what gives them energy, what causes them to lose motivation. A leader who understands themselves is often be better positioned to understand others. Now let's understand the role of autonomy. One powerful source of motivation is autonomy. Autonomy means having some degree of control over how work is performed. Now imagine two employees. Employee A receives instructions for every tiny action. Call this person at exactly 10. Write this sentence. Send this email. Use this format. Do not make any changes. Employee B is given a clear outcome. Your objective is to increase customer retention, develop an approach, and present your proposal. Employee B has more autonomy. Many people find autonomy motivating because it creates ownership. However, autonomy should exist within appropriate boundaries. Empowerment creates ownership. When people feel trusted with meaningful responsibility, they often develop greater ownership. Instead of thinking, this is my manager's project, they begin thinking, this is our project. That shift is extremely valuable. Ownership often leads to more initiative, more problem solving, more responsibility, greater engagement. But empowerment requires trust. If every decision is second guessed, employees eventually stop making initiative. The micromanagement problem. Micromanagement is one of the most common motivation killers. A micromanager wants to control how the task is performed, when it is performed, who is involved, what format is used, what decision is made, even minor details. The employee begins thinking, why should I use my judgment? My manager will change everything anyway. Eventually, initiative decreases. The manager then complains, my employees never take initiative. The behavior may actually have been created by the manager. Trust and motivation. Trust and motivation are closely connected. When leaders trust employees appropriately, employees may feel competent, respected, valued, responsible. When leaders constantly monitor employees, employees may feel distrusted, controlled, underestimated. This does not mean leaders should never monitor performance. Accountability is necessary. The key is the difference between monitoring outcomes and controlling every action. Recognition as a motivator. Recognition can have a powerful effect. Imagine an employee who works hard to solve a difficult problem. The manager says nothing. Another employee does the same work and receives recognition publicly. What happens? The first employee may wonder, why should I continue putting in extra effort? Recognition communicates, I noticed, I value your contribution, it matters. This does not mean praising everything. Recognition should be genuine and connected to meaningful contribution. Public and private recognition. Not everyone likes public recognition. Some employees enjoy being recognized in front of others. Others prefer private acknowledgement. A good leader understands individual preferences. For one employee, excellent work. I'd like to recognize you during the team meeting. May be motivating for another. I wanted to tell you privately that I really appreciated your contribution. Maybe better. Again, motivation is personal. The importance of fairness. Motivation can disappear quickly when employees perceive unfairness. Imagine two employees producing similar results. One receives a promotion, the other receives nothing. If the reason is clear and based on legitimate differences, employees may accept it. But if the decision appears arbitrary or based on personal favoritism, employees may um, um, the resentment grows. People constantly compare my effort, my reward, my colleague's effort, my colleague's reward. This perception of fairness strongly influences workplace motivation. Motivation and goal setting. Clear goals can motivate people. Compare do your best with increase customer retention by 10% over the next 6 months while maintaining customer satisfaction above the agreed benchmark. The second goal is clearer. Employees understand what success looks like, but goals must be realistic. An impossible target does not necessarily motivate, it may create frustration. Good goals should stretch people without making success appear impossible. Now let's understand what are the challenges and growth. People often become more motivated when work provides an opportunity appropriate level of challenge. If a task is too easy, boredom may develop. If a task is impossibly difficult, frustration may develop. The ideal challenge is often one that requires effort and learning while still being achievable. This is where leaders can play an important role. They can gradually increase responsibility. First, manage this small project, then, now lead a cross functional project, then, now mentor another employee. The employee develops through increasingly challenging experiences. Now, let me take you through career development. One of the strongest motivational factors for many employees is the opportunity to grow. Growth can mean promotion, new responsibilities, training, certification, new skills, leadership opportunities, exposure to senior management, participation in strategic projects. Not every employee wants the same career path. A good leader discusses development rather than assuming everyone's ambition is identical. Now let's understand the leader as a developer of people. A powerful leadership question is how can I make this employee better than they were when they joined my team? Now imagine a manager who achieves excellent short term results but leaves employees dependent. Imagine a leader who develops employees so well that they eventually become capable of managing major responsibilities independently. The second leader has created something that lasts. Leadership is therefore not only about achieving today's results, it is about building tomorrow's capability. Motivation during difficult times. Now you can see motivation becomes particularly important when things are going badly. Imagine a company facing declining revenue. Employees are worried. Targets are becoming harder. People are tired. A leader cannot simply say, work harder. That may increase pressure without increasing motivation. Instead, the leader can communicate the situation is difficult. Here is what we are facing. Here are the priorities. Here is what we can control. Here is how each team contributes. We will review progress regularly. Clarity reduces helplessness. Purpose creates direction. Support creates confidence. Let's understand leadership during failure. Failure can destroy motivation if handled badly. Suppose a team works for a year on a project that fails. Manager says this was a waste of time. And what happens? The team definitely becomes discouraged. A leader might say the outcome was disappointing, but the team developed capabilities and learned things that we did not know before. Let's understand what happened and decide what we will do differently. The failure remains, but definitely the meaning changes. Instead of we failed, The team begins thinking we learned. That can restore motivation. Now, what's the fear as a motivator? Some managers believe fear is an effective motivator. They say if people are afraid of losing their jobs, they will work harder. Fear can sometimes create short term compliance, but fear has serious long term costs. Employees may hide their mistakes, avoid taking risks, stop sharing ideas. They may become quite anxious, and they might focus on protecting themselves, or even they could leave the organization. Fear may produce activity, but it rarely produces healthy commitment. Leadership aims for commitment rather than fear based compliance. Now let's understand positive pressure versus toxic pressure. A certain level of pressure can improve performance, deadlines can create focus, challenging targets can encourage effort, high standards can encourage excellence, but pressure becomes unhealthy when employees believe no matter what I do, it will never be enough. Failure will be punished harshly. I cannot speak honestly. I must sacrifice everything to survive. Leaders must distinguish productive challenge from destructive pressure. Motivation and workplace culture. Motivation is strongly influenced by culture. Imagine a workplace where people help each other, ideas are welcomed, effort is recognized, mistakes are discussed constructively, managers listen, employees have reasonable autonomy, development is encouraged. Such a culture can naturally support motivation. Now imagine blame, favoritism, fear, micromanagement, constant criticism, no recognition, no growth. Even highly motivated people may eventually disengage. This is why leaders must think beyond individual motivational techniques. They must create an environment in which motivation can survive. Now, let me take you through a detailed case study. Consider a hypothetical company called FutureWorks. The company has talented employees, but employee engagement is declining. Management initially assumes people need higher salaries. The company increases salaries. For a short period, satisfaction improves, but 6 months later, engagement declines again. The leadership team investigates, they discover employees have little autonomy, managers rarely recognize good work, career paths are unclear, employees are afraid to disagree, projects are repetitive, communication is poor. The company realizes that compensation was only one part of the problem. Leadership begins making changes. Employees receive more ownership. Managers are trained in feedback. Career development discussions are introduced. Teams are given more challenging projects. Recognition becomes more consistent. Leaders communicate the organization's purpose more clearly. Over time, motivation improves. The lesson is important. Motivation is usually a system, not a single button. Now, let's understand motivation and meaningful work. People often want to believe that their work matters. Imagine someone spending 8 hours every day performing tasks without understanding their impact. Eventually, they may feel disconnected. A leader can create meanings by explaining who benefits from this work. Why does this process matter? What problem are we solving? What would happen if we did not do it? How does this task contribute to the larger goal? This does not require exaggeration, it requires connection. Inspiring through example. One of the most powerful forms of leadership inspiration is personal example. Suppose a leader tells employees, we must remain calm under pressure. Then the leader panics whenever a problem occurs. The message loses credibility. Suppose a leader says, we must treat customers respectfully. Then the leader speaks disrespectfully to the employees. Again, what happens? Credibility disappears. People watch leaders, they do observe. how leaders behave under pressure, how leaders treat people with less power, how leaders respond to mistakes, and how do they react to criticism, how do they behave when nobody is watching. Leadership by example is powerful because it makes values visible. Now let's understand resilience as inspiration. Employees often look to leaders during difficult situations. A resilient leader does not deny difficulties, they acknowledge them, but they continue moving forward. Imagine a team experiencing repeated setbacks. The leader says, "We have had several problems, but each problem has taught us something. We will solve the next one." That attitude can influence the entire team. Resilience is contagious. So is panic. Now let's understand the danger of fake motivation. Not every motivational speech creates motivation. Employees quickly recognize empty slogans: dream big, work harder, be unstoppable, success is a choice. These statements may sound exciting, but if employees are dealing with unreasonable workloads, unfair managers, poor pay, no resources, no development, no recognition, then slogans will not solve the problem. Um, Real leadership addresses underlying conditions. Motivation must be supported by reality. What is motivation and accountability? Motivation does not eliminate accountability. A leader can be inspiring and still say this standard has not been met. Motivation without standards can create complacency. Standards without motivation can create fear. The effective combination is high expectations plus high support. The leader communicates, "I believe you are capable of achieving this and I will support you, but I also expect you to meet the agreed standard." That is powerful. The Pygmalion effect. A fascinating concept in organizational behavior is the Pygmalion effect. In simple terms, people's performance can be influenced by the expectations others have of them. If a leader genuinely believes you are capable of handling greater responsibility, the employee may become more confident and perform at a higher level. If a manager constantly communicates you cannot handle this, the employee may begin to doubt themselves. Expectations can influence behavior. This does not mean leaders should create unrealistic expectations. It means leaders should avoid unnecessarily limiting people. Belief in people. One of the greatest gifts a leader can provide is genuine belief. Imagine an employee who has never led a project. The manager says, "I think you are ready. I will support you, but I want you to take the lead." The employee may initially feel nervous, but the opportunity itself communicates, "I believe you are capable." That can become a turning point in someone's career. Leadership often involves seeing potential in people before they fully see it in themselves, motivating without manipulating. There is an important ethical boundary. Leaders should motivate people, but they should not manipulate them. Manipulation may involve fear, guilt, deception, false promises, emotional pressure. A leader should not say, "If you really cared about the team, you would work every weekend." That is manipulation. A healthier approach is, "This project is important, but we also need to manage work sustainably. Here are the priorities and resources available." Ethical leadership respects people's autonomy. Let's understand inspiration and values. Inspiration becomes stronger when it is connected to values. Suppose an organization values integrity, customer service, innovation, respect, learning. Leaders must demonstrate these values. If integrity is stated value, but leaders hide mistakes, employees learn that integrity is only a slogan. If respect is a value, but managers humiliate employees, employees stop believing the message. Values become motivating when people see them in action. The ultimate difference between motivating and leading. A manager may ask, how can I get employees to work harder? A leader asks, how can I create conditions in which people want to contribute their best? That does profound difference. The first question focuses on extracting effort, the second focuses on creating commitment. A manager may use targets, deadlines, rewards, consequences. A leader also creates purpose, trust, ownership, growth, recognition, autonomy, belonging, inspiration. The strongest organizations use both approaches appropriately. Now, as I come to chapter 7 conclusion, let me bring this chapter together. Motivation is not simply about money, it is not simply about rewards, it is not simply about giving motivational speeches. Motivation is influenced by a combination of fairness, purpose, recognition, growth, autonomy, achievement, relationships, trust, working conditions, compensation, leadership, culture, and also individual differences. We also learned the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation encourages action, inspiration creates belief and meaning. Management can create structures that support performance. Leadership can create commitment to a larger purpose. We learn that fear may produce short term compliance but can damage long term engagement. We learn that recognition can reinforce valuable behavior. We learn that autonomy can create ownership. We learn that leaders should develop people rather than keeping them permanently dependent. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: people rarely give their best simply because they are told to. They are more likely to give their best when they understand the purpose, feel respected, trust their leaders, have the ability to contribute, have a reasonable autonomy, see opportunities for growth, receive meaningful recognition, and believe that their work matters. That is why leadership is ultimately about people. A leader does not simply ask, what can I get from my employees? A leader asks, what can I help my employees become? When leaders think this way, the relationship changes. Employees are no longer treated merely as people who complete tasks. They become contributors, problem solvers, decision makers, future leaders, and eventually, some of those employees may become leaders themselves. That is how leadership multiplies. A great leader does not create followers who remain dependent forever. A great leader creates capable people who can eventually lead others, and that is perhaps one of the biggest, highest forms of leadership success. In the next chapter, we will examine one of the most visible differences between leaders and managers: power, authority, and influence. So, let me discuss in deep about power, authority, and influence. Let us understand why people follow leaders. Welcome to chapter 8 of our detailed lecture on leadership versus management. What's the difference? So, let me um, remind you, in the previous chapter, we explored motivation and inspiration and examined how leaders bring out the best in people. We also discussed intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, recognition, autonomy, empowerment, purpose, employee development, trust, and the importance of creating an environment where people genuinely want to contribute. Now we move into a fascinating and sometimes misunderstood area of leadership, that's power, authority, and influence. These three concepts are closely connected, but they are not one and the same. A manager might have authority, a leader might have influence, a senior executive may have considerable power. But having power does not automatically make someone a leader. Having a job title does not automatically create respect, and having authority does not automatically create commitment. So, here the central question of the chapter is, why do people follow some individuals willingly while they merely obey others because they have to? So, to understand leadership deeply, we need to understand the difference between power, authority, and influence. Now, what is power? Power is the ability to affect the behavior, decisions, or actions of other people. In an organization, power can come from many sources. A manager may have power because they can assign work, approve leave, allocate resources, recommend promotions, evaluate performance, set priorities, make decisions. A senior executive may have even greater organizational power, but power does not necessarily come only from a formal position. A person may have significant influence because of knowledge, experience, relationships, reputation, communication skills, expertise, personality, trust. Therefore, power can exist even when someone does not have a formal leadership position. So, what is authority? Authority is the legitimate right to make decisions, give instructions, or direct others within a particular role. For example, a department manager may have authority to approve certain expenses, assign responsibilities, set departmental priorities, evaluate employees, take operational decisions. That authority comes from the organization. It is connected It is connected to the position. This is why authority is often described as formal power. A person becomes a manager. The organization gives that person certain rights and responsibilities. Those rights create authority. Authority comes with responsibility. Authority should never be viewed only as a privilege. It comes with responsibility. If a manager has the authority to make decisions, the manager must also accept accountability for those decisions. For example, if you have authority to allocate resources, you should also be accountable for how those resources are used. If you have authority to evaluate employees, you should also be responsible for making fair assessments. If you have authority to set targets, you should consider whether those targets are realistic. Authority without accountability can become dangerous. Now let's understand what is influence. Influence is the ability to affect another person's thinking, behavior, decisions, or actions without necessarily relying on formal authority. This is where leadership becomes particularly interesting. Imagine an employee who has no managerial title, yet, whenever the team faces a difficult problem, everyone naturally turns to that person. Why? Perhaps the person has deep expertise, perhaps they remain calm under pressure, perhaps they are trustworthy, perhaps they listen, perhaps they have excellent judgment. That person has influence. They may not have formal authority, but people value their opinion. That is informal leadership. Now let's understand power versus authority versus influence. Let us simply understand simplify the difference. Power is a capacity to affect outcomes or behavior. Authority is the legitimate right to make decisions within a role. Influence is the ability to affect people through credibility, relationships, persuasion, expertise, and other forms of interpersonal impact. A manager may have authority without much influence. A leader may have significant influence without formal authority. The strongest organizational leaders often have both. They have the authority required by their position and they have the influence required to create genuine commitment. Do it because I said so. One of the weakest forms of managerial communication is do it because I said so. Why is this weak? because it relies entirely on authority. The manager is essentially communicating, I have the position, you do not. This may produce compliance, but it does not necessarily produce understanding or commitment. Imagine another manager saying, this is the direction we are taking, and here is the why. I know there are challenges, so let us discuss how we can execute it effectively. The second manager still exercises authority, but they also use influence, obedience versus commitment. This is a very important distinction. Obedience means following an instruction, commitment means personally accepting and supporting the objective. Suppose a manager says complete the report by Friday, the employee completes it because the manager instructed them to. That is compliance. Now imagine the employee understands why the report matters, who depends on it, what outcome it will create, and feels ownership of the work. The employee may still complete it by Friday, but now there is commitment behind the action. Strong leaders try to move people from I have to do this towards I want to contribute to this. The power of position. A job title can provide significant power, for example, CEO, director, vice president, general manager, department head, manager, supervisor. These positions come with authority, but there is an important warning. A title can give you authority, but it cannot automatically give you respect. Respect must be earned. Imagine a newly appointed manager enters a department. The employees immediately recognize the person's title. They may follow instructions because they have to, but over time, employees will observe, does this person understand the work? Are decisions fair? Does the manager listen? Does the manager take responsibility? Does the manager protect the team? Does the manager give credit? Does the manager admit mistakes? These behaviors determine whether formal authority becomes genuine leadership influence. Positional power. Positional power comes from the formal role. Examples include reward power, coercive power, legitimate power. A manager may reward employees, a manager may impose consequences, a manager may have legitimate authority to make decisions. These forms of power can be necessary. Organizations need structure, people need accountability. Decisions sometimes need to be made quickly, but relying exclusively on positional power can create problems. Reward power. Reward power comes from the ability to provide desirable outcomes. A manager may influence behavior through bonuses, promotions, recognitions, better assignments, career opportunities. Rewards can encourage performance, but if employees work only for rewards, motivation may become transactional. The employees begin thinking, what do I get in return? This can be useful in some situations, but leadership should ideally create a deeper relationship with work. Coercive power. Coercive power comes from the ability to impose consequences. Examples include warnings, disciplinary action, loss of privileges, negative performance consequences. In extreme cases, termination. Some degree of coercive power is necessary in organizations. Rules require enforcement. Serious misconduct may require consequences, but excessive reliance on fear can create a toxic culture. Employees may become more concerned about avoiding punishment than doing excellent work. Legitimate power. Legitimate power comes from the formal authority or of the position. For example, a finance manager may have authority over financial approvals. A project manager may have authority over project assignments. A department head may have authority over departmental decisions. Legitimate power is important because organizations cannot operate effectively if nobody knows who has the decision making responsibility. But again, authority can create compliance, it does not automatically create commitment. Expert power. Now we come to a particularly powerful form of influence, expert power. Expert power comes from knowledge, skill, and competence. Imagine a technical team facing a difficult problem. The manager may not understand the technical issue deeply, but one engineer has 20 years of experience. Everyone turns to that engineer. Why? Because of expertise. That person has influence even without formal authority. Expertise creates credibility. Why compliance builds influence? People are more likely to trust leaders who demonstrate competence. Employees ask, does this leader understand the business? Does this leader understand our customers? Does this leader understand the challenges we face? Can this leader make sound decisions? Does this leader learn? A leader does not need to know everything, but a leader should demonstrate the ability to understand, learn, and make responsible decisions. Pretending to know everything can destroy credibility. Referent power. Another important form of power is referent power. This comes from admiration, respect, and identification. People may follow someone because they admire them, trust them, respect them, respect their character, identify with their values, want to learn from them. This is one of the strongest forms of leadership influence. Imagine an employee saying, I would work for this person anywhere. That statement reflects strong referent power. The person is not simply obeying, they genuinely value the leader. Character and influence. Character is central to referent power. People observe whether leaders are honest, fair, reliable, respectful, courageous, consistent, accountable. Imagine a leader who takes credit for employees' work. That leader may have authority, but over time, respect declines. Now imagine a leader who says, the team did this. I want to recognize the people who actually made it happen. That leader builds credibility. The power of credibility. Credibility can be thought of as a combination of competence, integrity, consistency. When people believe this person knows what they are doing and this person can be trusted, influence automatically grows. But credibility is mostly fragile. One serious breach of trust can damage years of relationship building. That is why leaders should never underestimate the importance of small promises. If you repeatedly say, I will get back to you tomorrow, and you never do it, people eventually stop believing you. Relational power. Leadership is also influenced by relationships. People who build strong professional relationships often have greater influence. This does not mean being friends with everyone. It means knowing people, understanding their strengths, respecting their concerns, being available, keeping commitments, helping others succeed. Relationships based influence is especially important during difficult situations. People are more likely to support someone they trust. Influence without manipulation. Influence is not manipulation. This distinction is extremely important. Influence can involve persuasion, evidence, reasoning, empathy, trust, storytelling, negotiation, collaboration. Manipulation involves deliberately controlling another person's behavior through deception or exploitation. A leader may persuade an employee, here is why I believe this approach will work. That is influence. A leader saying, if you don't agree with me, I will make sure your career suffers, is coercion. Ethical leadership uses influence responsibly. Persuasion. Persuasion is an important leadership skill. A leader often needs to persuade senior executives, employees, customers, partners, investors, other departments. A leader may have an idea but lack direct authority over the people who need to support it. This is where persuasion becomes essential. Effective persuasion combines logic, evidence, credibility, understanding the audience, clear communication, emotional connection. Logic and emotion. Human beings are not purely logical decision makers. We use both reason and emotion. Suppose a leader wants approval for a new project, they provide financial data that appeals to logic. They explain how the project will improve the customer experience that may appeal to values and emotion. Strong leadership communication often connects both. Here is why this makes business sense, and here is why it matters. Leadership without formal authority. One of the most important lessons for students of leadership is this: you do not need a managerial title to demonstrate leadership. A junior employee can demonstrate leadership by taking responsibility, helping colleagues, solving problems, speaking up about risks, supporting new employees, taking initiative, maintaining standards. A person may have zero direct reports and still demonstrate extraordinary leadership. The emerging leader. Imagine an employee named Ananya. She is not a manager, but when a project begins, she naturally organizes information, helps colleagues, identifies risks, communicates clearly, takes responsibility, supports others. The formal manager notices that people trust Ananya. She is demonstrating leadership before receiving a leadership title. This is important because organizations should identify leadership potential before promotion. Not every manager is a leader. This statement deserves attention. A manager can be excellent at planning, scheduling, budgeting, reporting, process control, yet still struggle with leadership. Similarly, someone can demonstrate leadership qualities without being a manager. That That is why management is a role, leadership is a capability and a behavior. They overlap, but they are not identical. The danger of title based leadership. A manager who constantly reminds employees, I am your manager, may be revealing insecurity. A strong leader does not need to repeatedly announce their authority. Their behavior establishes credibility. The strongest leaders can say, tell me what you think, challenge this assumption, what am I missing, who has a better idea. That does not weaken leadership, it strengthens it. Humility and power. Power can create psychological distance. The more senior a person becomes, the more carefully they should manage their ego. Why? Because employees may become reluctant to challenge them. Imagine a CEO entering a meeting. Everyone agrees with everything. The CEO may think we have excellent alignment, but perhaps employees are simply afraid. A humble leader creates space for disagreement. They say, I want the strongest argument, even if it contradicts my opinion. That is powerful leadership. Power can corrupt decision making. Power can sometimes create overconfidence. A leader may begin believing, I'm always right, my judgment is better than everyone else's, I don't need feedback. This can lead to poor decisions. Therefore, senior leaders need mechanisms that keep them corrected assignment, self realization.